Welcome back to the Wingspan Podcast, episode 39. I'm Doug Barak, joined by my co-host Chris Mahala, Nets Daily, and our special guest. He's the founder of Hochberg Sports Marketing.
We welcome Matt Hochberg to the podcast. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to join Doug and I. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Appreciate you guys having me on. Excited to chat.
Of course, we are excited as well. So,
great to have you on as well.
Well, we'll kick it off with what you've been up to since COVID started. So, what you've been up to, anything new, and kind of how have you been?
Yeah, for sure. And again, excited to chat with you guys. I think we've all interacted on Twitter, so nice to actually get on a video call and chat. Since COVID, I actually moved, as we were talking about off air, moved to Austin, Texas recently. So I'm in Austin now, and it's been great here. Obviously, a bit interesting with COVID and taking the necessary precautions and whatnot, but have been in Austin for the past month. And then professionally, I've been running my own company for about the past year or so, Hochberg Sports Marketing. So still focusing on that and just really focused on building it into a successful, long-term, sustainable business that I can continue to do for the long term.
Yeah, it sounds pretty good. And how's the weather by you?
It's great. Talked to all my friends and family out on the East Coast, and I think there was a snowstorm a couple of weeks ago, and I'm in like 70-degree and sunny weather. So no complaints for sure.
Sounds pretty good. So Can you talk about your journey and as you mentioned a little bit, like where you are today, like kind of what built you up to that, what college you go to, and your first relevant position or internship?
For sure. Yeah. So I always knew from a young age, like many people growing up, I wanted to work in sports, just didn't know exactly what. Went to Ithaca College up in Ithaca, New York, in the freezing cold where I saw snow in May, studying sport management and media. At that point, I was very interested in both the business and the media sides of sports. And I was writing about the NBA for Dime Magazine. Actually went to a few of the Orlando Summer Leagues to cover those for Dime and SB Nation. But I was also very interested in on the business side, and I actually interned at the Brooklyn Nets in 2014. And I interned in their sponsorship department. And that really opened up my eyes to all the different opportunities within sports and working with these major brands and having all these really interesting conversations and brainstorming creative activation ideas to engage fans and impact the community. And that really caught my eye. And I remember leaving that internship experience in August of 2014, knowing at that point I wanted to work on the partnership and sponsorship side of sports. So I graduated in 2016, and kind of the traditional route is to go through ticket sales and work your way up and then get to that sponsorship level within sports. So I started my career at Monumental Sports, which is the parent company of the Wizards and Capitals of the NBA and NHL. I was there for about 6-7 months, but I'm from New Jersey, grew up a New Jersey Nets fan, which I'm excited to talk about in a little bit. And I got a job in group sales working for the Brooklyn Nets and Barclays Center, where I was focused on talking to groups and organizations and businesses and getting them out to come to Barclays Center for Brooklyn Nets games, or at the time New York Islanders games, although that's an iffy relationship there, to say the least. And just having them really enjoy their time and have a great experience. Obviously, that's how Doug and I got connected and worked together a lot, which was a lot of fun. And then after the Nets, I finally entered that sponsorship world, and I've been in it ever since.
It's wonderful.
That's wonderful to hear. And then I got one question for you as well, because when I was in college, and you just talked about it a little bit as well, choosing between the business side and the media side, right? When you want to go into sports, when you were in that stage, what kind of led you to go more towards the kind of the business side rather than the media side? Because I took the opposite end. Because when I was in class as a freshman in college, I was debating whether, I was a business major at that time. And I was like, you know what, do I want to do this? But I'm better off as a talker. I could really communicate well. So that's why I went towards the media side. So in your case, why did you instead go that way?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would probably point to that summer when I interned at the Nets in 2014 as kind of the, one of the defining points in terms of the realization of what I wanted to do with my career. And something else that occurred to me was, that my love for writing and for the media side can still be met through working in the business world. And even today, I run my own sponsorship company, but I'm still writing about the business of sports. I recently published an article discussing all 30 NBA teams and their jersey patch partners and some of the activations and assets within those partnerships. So I feel as though, I'm still satisfying that writing itch I have, but, still doing something else I love on the business side.
Totally get that. Get that.
And then jumping back to, being a Nets fan and then working for the team, working with the team, what really stood out with you? Like how did you feel kind of being in that position? And as, went along, you started facilitating that same passion with, the fans who you sold tickets to. So kind of talk about that and what were some of your favorite moments working for them in the two different positions?
Yeah, for sure. Working for the Brooklyn Nets was absolutely awesome. I really enjoyed the experience. I loved it. I met a lot of awesome people. I still to this day have tons of great memories from my time there, and it was a little sad leaving. I even remember, when I was interviewing for jobs to get to the sponsorship side of the business, and I got this offer, and I was really excited about this offer, and family, friends happy for me, but at the same time, I remember my mom going, but you're going to leave the Nets. Like, that's kind of sad. I'm like, yeah, it kind of is sad. And my mom and girlfriend came to the last game I worked. And it definitely was sad leaving. But overall, tons of great experiences. As I said, I grew up a New Jersey Nets fan. So just being in that environment, where, providing these great experiences for all these different groups who are coming in, and bringing them into the stadium, and myself selfishly being able to kind of run around the stadium and go backstage. And, I took part in the high five line when James Harden ran out, just for fun to do that. And it was, definitely had some great experiences. And, on the other side, in the actual day job, you're in my position in group sales, I'm pounding out a lot of sales calls and, getting a lot of people that don't want to talk to me. So it's definitely a grind on that end. But there are obviously a lot of benefits as well when it comes to working for a professional sports team.
Yeah, definitely.
Most definitely. Then I have one question, then a two-part right after the follow. So obviously, mentors play a huge role no matter what field you're in, right? Especially if you're revolved in the field of sports, whether it's the business or media side, as we both know. So who have been some of your mentors so far in your journey?
Yeah, that's very true, Chris, and a great question. I feel like in any industry, in any career, but specifically within sports, which feels a bit smaller than many other industries, I think having mentors and relationships is super important. Two mentors stick out, and not to talk about the Nets this entire conversation, but both mentors that stick out actually come from my internship at the Brooklyn Nets in 2014. One was Jeff Lesser, who was in the sponsorship sales department at the time, and kind of took me under his wing and would, allow me to sit on calls and, really give me a meaningful work to do. Whereas, sometimes internships, I get a bad rap for just doing busy work and not actually meaningful work. But this was work that I saw Jeff actually take and he implemented. So it was very cool to see. And it's someone who I stayed in touch with. So even to this day in the years prior, and actually Jeff became my boss after I left the Nets when I was in group sales. So in my first sponsorship position. So it kind of goes to show how important those relationships are. And then one other I'll quickly mention, Samson Feldman. He was actually my supervisor at that internship at the Nets. Also on the sponsorship and partnership marketing teams. And he was a young guy. He was younger than most people who are in sponsorship. So he kind of understood some of the challenges that we were facing as interns, and really cared for us. So I would say those two are key mentors for me.
It's good to hear. And then a two-parter for you. So what's some of the best advice you received, and what advice would you give those who are looking to get into the same field you are and taking their talents to the next level?
Yeah, I think one piece of advice that I think about all the time, probably every day, and tell every aspiring sports business professional I speak with, is you make your own luck. And I think that's really important. Of course, there has to be hard work and an ambition to do something. But at the end of the day, you are putting yourself in certain situations, and you are also, your mindset is also a major factor in how you react to certain things. But to take kind of what I just talked about in regards to Jeff, I interned with him in 2014. I could have easily just not emailed him and have never stayed in touch with him after that internship, but I stayed in touch with him, and I did that knowing A, he's just a good guy, and I want to speak with him, but B, he's in sponsorship and I want to be in sponsorship. So it just makes sense to stay in touch with him and take the time when I'm, when I'm on my college campus, just to shoot him a quick email every few months and get on a call. It's 30 minutes of my time, and have that conversation. And then he ended up hiring me in my first sponsorship sales position. So I think making your own luck is really important. And, it's all about, the number of people you're reaching out to and the number of conversations you're having, and the more work you put in, the more you'll get out. So.
Yeah, definitely. And, you've kind of led up to this and mentioned a little bit. So what truly inspired you to start, your own sports marketing? And, how have you been building and amplifying the voices of athletes, brands, and, sports properties as a whole?
Yeah, for sure. So so prior to starting Hochberg Sports Marketing, I was at a company called Open Sponsorship, which is a platform that connects athletes and brands for endorsement deals and opportunities. And there was when I realized, and it really occurred to me, how many athletes there are that aren't a LeBron James or Tom Brady, who are amazing athletes, but more than that, they're hardworking, they're intelligent individuals, and they just really didn't have anyone paying attention to them to go about helping them build their brands. Everyone, who wants to work on the, in this sports business world, it seems like they want to work for the NBA or work with NBA stars or NFL stars. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's super cool and very impactful and awesome. But for me personally, I just found it more fulfilling working with the not the lesser athlete, but the niche athlete, the underserved athlete, and helping them build their brands, because they're the ones who I feel I really need it. Like, LeBron's going to be fine. I love LeBron. I'm a big LeBron guy, but he's going to be fine, and he doesn't need me. And I know that. But some of these niche athletes do need someone. And there wasn't really anyone in the space who was helping them. On the other end, you have all these brands that aren't a Nike or Coca-Cola and don't have these massive 7-8 figure budgets to go about, partnering with the Nets or doing a deal with LeBron, but they're still great brands for sports marketing. And they had a bad taste in their mouth because every time they ever get pitched any opportunities, it's like $1 million at the least. So, I really see Hochberg Sports Marketing as that bridge between the niche athlete and that growing brand to partner them for opportunities, win-win opportunities for both parties to grow.
Yeah, no, definitely. And what were some things that you've done thus far? I know it's very early on, but
Yeah. So it was interesting because I launched this agency about a year ago. So December of 2019, and then we all know what happened 2-3 months later to our world and to our society. So it was difficult at first to really get it off the ground because sports weren't happening, brands weren't spending money. There's a lot of uncertainty pretty much everywhere. So it was a bit difficult at first, but since then it's I feel like I have a good base. We're primarily working with athletes in sports such as National Women's Soccer League, in AVP beach volleyball, surf, ski, some other Olympic sports. And something that I've kind of stumbled upon, but have found myself very passionate about, is not only helping niche athletes, but helping female athletes as they face challenges that male athletes simply don't face, in terms of being recognized, in terms of receiving the attention that they deserve. So we've been able to secure some great deals for our athletes who are in the National Women's Soccer League and brands. And these are athletes who aren't making crazy salaries, and some of them who have never worked with a brand before. And now they're, seeing the value of working with the brands and allowing brands to elevate their careers by promoting them. And we've been able to close a number of deals, which I'm proud of. We're also working with Just Women's Sports, which is a media outlet dedicated to covering women's sports. And they have a podcast, and the host is Kelly O'Hara, who's on the U.S. Women's National Team, a star on the U.S. Women's National Team. And we've been able to get them some partners as well for their podcast and their newsletters. So proud of, the deals we've been able to do within the niche and female sports space.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Honestly, that's fantastic overall. And Matt, I have a question for you as well. Do you think that sports athletes are the most influential public figures that there are out here?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with that.
No, I'm glad you asked, because that's also something I probably talk about too much. And, my friends are like, all right, Matt, we get it. We get you love athletes, and we get you think they're super influential. But it's true, because especially in this world of influencer marketing, and no disrespect to the standard health and wellness influencer, and they do awesome work. And I know sometimes they'll get a bad rap, but ultimately, they have a hard job too. But it is my belief that athletes are the original influencers, and they have a trust and a connection with their following that the standard influencer simply doesn't have. And that comes from years and years of building that authentic relationship. And especially in today's day and age, when professional athletes are growing up on social media, they're making that connection with their followers at a very young age. You look at Bronny James, the son of LeBron James. He has, I want to say, more than 2.5 million followers on Instagram. So by the time he's a professional, and of course that's an extreme example, but by the time Bronny's a professional, he's already going to be a major household name, and he's going to have major trust with his following and with his fan base that others, in other types of influencer worlds simply won't have. So I'm very big on the belief of using athletes as your brand ambassadors to grow your brands.
And then one fun question I want to ask you as well to get your opinion on. What do you think of the Ball family, especially since their rise? Obviously the basketball talent's there, right? Especially in the high school, the college level, the hype was there as well. But a lot of the hype was around, obviously, what LeVar said, his vocals, his kind of out of the market type of praise for his sons, right? But do you think, just based on LeVar Ball in general, right, do you think that he is a marketing genius with how he kind of conducts himself around his three sons?
Yes, to an extent. I mean, I think, for some good reason, he's in the past, he's received a bad rap for some of what he said, which I don't blame people for being upset at. But I do think that it's a bit more calculated than people think in terms of what he was saying and when he was saying it. Was it a little over the top? Sure, but no one ever changed the game and changed the environment by just kind of falling in line. So I do respect it to an extent. Now he has two, I think at this point, two sons in the NBA. I don't think Alangelo is in the league right now, although he may be. But he has two super talented sons in the NBA, and he's kind of made good on his word. So you got to respect him for that.
And then from your perspective, what marketing trends do you feel have the most positive impact overall? And which do you think have the least effective nowadays?
Yeah, I think with COVID, marketing trends have dramatically changed or maybe accelerated from where they were pre-COVID. I think something we're seeing is leagues and teams very much more, even solely in some cases, focusing on digital media and social and ways to interact with people virtually versus in person for obvious reasons. But I think that will even continue post-COVID when fans do return. There will maintain that heavy focus on digital and social media, and just interacting with fans and followers from all around the globe, even if they can't be in attendance. So I think that's a major trend, and I think that also bodes well for brands who will now be able to reach more people, and there's more digital activations. I also think from the athlete end, something really interesting is athletes becoming much more business savvy, and that business savviness is translating into them not just getting paid X amount to do a social media post or to appear in a commercial, but actually becoming so investors and equity partners within companies. If you look at Hyperice, which is now an official partner of the NBA, they've taken on a number of athletes who aren't just doing social posts and getting some free product, and they're like, yeah, Hyperice is great, but they're actually getting a seat at the table and are significantly more invested than in previous deals. So I think that's another major trend that will continue as well.
Yeah, something I've noticed, with the NBA bubble, Myers Leonard with Coors Light has been a big thing. During the off season, he and his wife and dog, went in a Coors RV across the country. And it's interesting how some of these athletes, they get to actually represent something they genuinely use, and you see that it's very important and big. So I kind of like how personal interest really pushes it. It's not like sometimes what feels like forced marketing, as you kind of mentioned, with some of the posts that we've seen, especially the ones where they say fill in the blanks and they don't.
Yeah.
For sure. No, I totally agree with you. I think gone are the days where these major athletes are just gonna take a check and promote a product that they don't believe in. I think they're more educated themselves these days. They have people protecting them in better ways. So I think that's a trend that's definitely here to it's definitely here to stay for sure.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, athletes are some of the biggest influencers in their own right, not just because they hoop and because their vocal platform, but also their own leisure. You have Jimmy Butler with Big Face Coffee. You have quite a few of them being gamers, some TikTok stars, or just, content creators in general with videos. So, like, what do you think of that as someone, in the marketing field?
Yeah, for sure. I think something really interesting, and one of the reasons I really believe in the field that I'm working in is truly because these athletes are not just basketball players or soccer players or football players, but they're people, and they have interests away from the courts and away from the fields. So, even for example, if I'm speaking with a company focused on home cooked meals, and they tell me, well, hey, it doesn't really make sense to work with athletes because they're on the basketball court and they're busy. Well, that's a bit silly, because take Serge Ibaka, who posts videos on YouTube about the meals he cooks and about he loves cooking and he considers himself a chef. So, and that's really the more authentic type of partnership, right? Serge Ibaka, who's naturally posting about how he loves cooking anyway, to then partner with a cooking company makes all the sense in the world. So, it just a field where I think truly every brand, specifically a consumer-facing brand, has an avenue and a authentic reason to partner with an athlete.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing, jumping back to Chris's question, is what kind of trends have you personally used during this time?
Yeah, trends in terms of sports marketing.
Yeah, like what have you been doing to market yourself and to interact with basically the communities that you represent and want to represent?
Yeah, for sure. Something that I've been focusing on a bit more that I honestly ignored a bit at the beginning was having quality social media presence for Hochberg Sports Marketing. Like, I'm not good at graphic design. That's also not going to see an immediate return on investment, right? Just posting on Instagram. But it's really important to be active, for my agency to be active on social media, because when I'm reaching out to new athletes or reaching out to new brands, they're most likely going to look at HSM's Instagram and look at HSM's Twitter. So it's really important for my feeds to be active. So I have someone working with me part-time, and she's done a great job of keeping the feeds active and ensuring that, when athletes come, that they'll be excited about working with HSM. That includes, even during COVID, obviously, we all know how much TikTok has blown up. We know about Instagram's copycat of Reels. So we've been on those channels as well, just because we want to be where the emerging athlete is.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I know your passion for writing also translates to HSM with your newsletter. So can you kind of talk about that, the name behind it and what kind of things you've written about? As you mentioned, the logos, but what are some other things?
Yeah, for sure. So during COVID, I started a weekly newsletter from Hochberg Sports Marketing called the Elbow Bump. Obviously, elbow bump, no one's high-fiving these days, or no one should be, I guess. So I guess an elbow bump is more acceptable. So I just thought that was kind of a fun name for it. And then in regards to the newsletter, it was, to your point, Doug, to continue to grow the HSM brand and just become, more of a resource. And I'm very much of the belief that if you just give, you will ultimately get back, right? It's not like every conversation I have or thing I do is to see an immediate return. It's just really about giving and like being a positive person and putting out good vibes into the world, and and getting that back in some way or another. So I started the Elbow Bump just to be a resource for athletes, whether they were HSM athletes or not, and just to keep them up to date with the sports marketing world and provide them with ideas on how to help them monetize and to grow their brands. The newsletter's on a bit of a pause right now, but that was the thinking behind it.
That's wonderful. Yeah. So switching gears. So when did you start watching the NBA? As you already mentioned, you're a Nets fan. So what was kind of your earliest memory with the team? And I guess go from there.
Yeah, sure. I've always been an NBA fan. My primary two sports growing up were baseball and basketball. A major Yankees fan, a major Nets fan, but I always enjoy the NBA overall more than the MLB overall, which I think makes sense, just given the pace of the games and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I remember going to games at Continental Airlines Arena and Izod Center. One of my first memories, I don't think it's my first, but one of my first is going to, I believe it was Izod Center at the time. Thank God the Nets aren't there anymore. It's not a great arena. Going to Izod for a Nets Cavs game when LeBron was on the Cavs, and it was, I think, like a Jewish Heritage Night, a type of outing. So I remember my mom being really excited about like the Jewish Heritage Night aspect, and me being really excited that I'm about to see LeBron play. But that's probably one of my first memories.
That's good. And then since you talked about already, you grew up a New Jersey Nets fan, so we all know the memories that they had back then in the Meadowlands and stuff. But what's it like seeing them go from, well, the 12 wins, some players there in New Jersey, the rough days in New Jersey, wasn't all bright, except for the Jason Kidd era, to where they are today. So what were some of your favorite memories, some of your favorite players, and what did you feel when you saw that clean sweep tweet?
Yeah. It's really an amazing feeling. I was texting with a good buddy of mine, Dave, who's a big Nets fan as well, and we were texting on opening night when they were playing the Warriors, seeing KD and Kyrie out there together. We're like, wow, this is pretty surreal. Like, Kevin Durant is actually a Brooklyn Net. Like, this is wild. And the NBA actually chose the Nets to play the first game of the NBA season. Like, that is insane. You know, that would have been unheard of a few years ago. So it's been great seeing this team. Naturally, there will be a lot of overreactions throughout the season. 2 disappointing losses in a row right now to put us at 2-2. But I think it's a long season. I think they'll be fine. And yeah, I mean, I'm just so happy to have this team and have this talented team that, you know, I saw a tweet from, I think it was a Hawks fan, and I think the Nets are playing the Hawks tomorrow. And the tweet said it was some sort of curse word, and goes, "Oh man, we have to play the Nets." And I just like took a step back from that tweet. I was like, wow, people actually fear playing the Nets now. Like, this is awesome. Like, that was always us fearing playing other teams for so many years. So it's a great feeling. And I feel like it's also a great group of guys. And I also have to give so much credit to Sean Marks. And I really think he's built such a great organization from a culture perspective when it comes to taking care of the players and taking care of their families. And I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough, is that, you know, when a player is a free agent and is deciding where to go, it's not just about their win-loss record. Sure, that's a part of it, I guess, and the talent around the team. But it's, you know, there's many factors, the city there and et cetera, but it's also about how the team treats its players. And that's a reputation that quickly gets passed along throughout the entire league. So I think that's a major aspect of the Brooklyn Nets that does not get talked about enough. And again, a lot of credit to Sean Marks for that.
Of course. And then getting back to New Jersey, who were some of your favorite players? Like, when I was there, let's start off. Who was that player that got you into basketball? You know, everyone's got that one player that really got into you in the basketball. Like, mine was Andre Iguodala. That was the first game I ever went to. Nets, Sixers, and he kind of got me into the game. And then it's kind of been, well, the road has been paved since. But who was that, like, one player that really got you into the game?
Yeah, for sure. So I was always an NBA fan growing up, and then my favorite player was Brandon Roy.
Really?
I loved Brandon Roy. All my names of all my fantasy basketball leagues were Brandon Roy Fan Club, or I love Brandon Roy, just strange names like that. And I just really respected him. He played all 4 years in college when I think he had an opportunity to go straight from high school to the pros, and he decided to go to college and then stayed all 4 years in college. And he just was a class act, was super talented. Unfortunately, as we all know, his career ended too early from knee injuries. But it looks like he's become a great high school coach. But loved Brandon Roy. And then there's so many like random players on the New Jersey Nets who I had a weird fascination with, like Sean Williams. I loved Sean Williams and his ability to literally block every shot on the face of the earth. I was a big Marshawn Brooks guy. I wish he lasted longer in the NBA. And there are just so many other players throughout, like, that are in my memory that I like smile when I think of, like Petro, Josh Boone. There are a lot of players like that. As terrible as some of those Nets teams were, I do miss those teams, and I miss those players a little bit.
I do as well.
And what were some of your, favorite memories attending those games, and what was, I guess, your favorite memory when they finally moved?
Yeah. So the first thing I think of about the move is how controversial it was at the time, to fans in Jersey, but also to the Brooklyn community. I think that was extremely sensitive and pretty controversial at the time. I would like to think, and I do think to an extent, that they've made good on their promise to help and positively impact the local Brooklyn community. So I definitely respect the organization for that, and I know firsthand from being there internally that's a major focus for them, is to impact the local community in a positive way and really be a voice for the voiceless. But yeah, it was controversial. It was definitely a little sad, them leaving the Garden State where I grew up, where my family still is. But it was also understandable, and I also think they've done a good they've done a great job in terms of branding themselves and, and kind of flipping the narrative to make themselves a quote unquote cool franchise. Not that that's the most important thing, but it is, to an extent, it is important when you're trying to bring in new fans and bring in new athletes. So I think they've overall done a pretty good job.
And then what are your expectations this year for Kevin and the Kyrie era, just in general, from this year to years onward? What are your expectations?
Nets over Lakers in 6.
Oh, okay.
Starting with this season?
Starting with this season. You heard it here first.
There we go.
I've been going around telling people, everyone thinks I'm crazy. Nets over Lakers in 6.
Now I got to ask you this. Are you fine with how the roster is with that Lakers in 6 prediction, or do you think they need to make a move in order to fulfill that? What do you think?
Yeah, it worries me a bit, and the Lakers were amazing last season and only got better with the additions that they made in the offseason of Schroeder, of Gasol. I'm forgetting one or two guys, but yeah, exactly. The Lakers are a great team. I do think that the Nets, how they currently are constructed, can beat the Lakers. I do think that there are a few moves that they could make, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they do make a few moves throughout the season that would put them in a better position. Obviously, the Dinwiddie news is definitely a bummer, and I just love Dinwiddie as a guy as well on a personal level. But I do think that they could beat the Lakers, but I will see.
Fair enough.
I like that.
And do you have any moves in the back of your head? Everyone talks about James Harden, but is there anyone else that you think the Nets should potentially aim for, whether it's, a national celebrity type or, under the radar?
Yeah, I think one of the many great things about Sean Marks is that he's someone who's not going to fall into public pressure of just making a move because for the sake of making a move, because that's what the fans want or what the public wants or what the media thinks he should do. He's going to make a move that is the best move for the Brooklyn Nets and for the Nets roster. I do think that the team can use, especially if we're talking about Nets Lakers here, team can use some help in the front court. And it'll be interesting to see what they do there. And there are a good amount of guards on the team. Again, the Dinwiddie news doesn't help. But I think the front court can use a little help if they're going to go up against the Lakers.
Yeah, I do think if it comes down to a shootout, the Nets do have the advantage. But when it comes to getting those rebounds, it's not guaranteed at this time.
Exactly.
And then, what were your your early thoughts on seeing Kevin Durant finally in the uniform, finally play, hit some of those shots? And just him as a brand entirely, because we talked about LeBron, but let's bring it home.
Yeah. No, so I've actually always been on the KD train. Even when he went to the Warriors, I was team KD. I'm very much an athlete advocate, and I think athletes have the right to go where they please. And I think there's also so many factors that the average fan doesn't think of. This is a job to them. And maybe they just don't like the city, and maybe they want to move cities. Like I moved to Austin and didn't get any flack for it. Maybe a player just wants to move cities and experience a new city, or maybe the player's kids aren't enjoying their school. There are so many factors, and those are just two specific examples. Those are two factors that people don't think about. And another factor that kind of irks me is there are many, many players who play in the NBA who are talented NBA players who don't love playing basketball. And I think that's another aspect that a lot of fans don't think of. People assume that if you're a professional athlete, you must love it. And I'm sure many of them do. And to put in that work to get to that point, you really do must love it. But look at Larry Sanders with the Bucks. He did not like playing basketball at all. He just did it because he was tall growing up and was talented and people told him to do it and he did it. But he did not enjoy playing basketball. And there are many, many other players who don't enjoy it. Sorry, that was a little rant, but to go back to KD, I respected him when he went to the Warriors because that's what he wanted to do, and so many people judge people on rings anyway, which I think is arbitrary because basketball is a team sport. So the people that were giving him crap for going to the Warriors would probably give him crap if he never won a ring. So he retired. And I'm also proud of this. I tweeted 9 months before KD signed with the Nets in that July that I thought he was going to sign with the Nets, and I listed all these reasons. So that's a claim to fame I have. But again, I think it's just awesome that he's on the Nets. I think him and Kyrie are best friends, and I'm very thankful that they're such good friends, because if they're just two super talented players but like not that close, I don't know how easy it would be for KD to put up with Kyrie all the time. So I'm appreciative how close they are, because they're close friends, and I think KD gets Kyrie a little more than we do, than the media does, than the general public does. So I think that's an important relationship. And yeah, I mean, I think maybe a little bit KD is looking for some validation, because now people kind of discount his rings on the Warriors. And I think if he were to win one on the Brooklyn Nets, it would, kind of put all those critics to bed. So very excited about KD. He really is playing like he was pre-injury. And I think, so it's funny, during the Nets Celtics game, when KD was going off, and I was reading some of the commentary on Twitter after, and it seemed like almost people were a little surprised about how well KD was playing. And I feel like a lot of Nets fans, sure, they're holding their breath a little bit, but they were pretty confident KD was going to be KD. So it felt like, to me, it wasn't like such a surprise that he was playing like he was playing. It was still amazing and surreal to see. But yeah, I think we're in for a very fun year.
Yeah, no, for me, I still gasp or, feel my heart drop a little bit when he's on the floor. But I think at this point it's conditioning, it's rust. I think it's pretty adamant that a lot of teams are going to have this slow start.
For sure.
Because of the relatively early beginning and lack of camp and practice. And a lot of teams like us, there's still a decent amount of new players, so that chemistry is not automatically going to be there. And for someone like KD, he had all that rest, but that live shots in games like this, that critical shot he missed the other night, that's right. Like, how can he?
Right.
But there are some things I still want to see with the team, and I went on a rant last night where KD and Kyrie need to stagger minutes. Just because they're best friends doesn't mean they have to play every minute together.
Sure.
It doesn't matter who starts at center, as long as the better one throughout the game or games ends it. Not going to name any names. And, we had this issue, relatively new offense, play to your strengths, and when you're comfortable, go into the system, but don't force the system. To me, a system is always a guideline. For the most part, there are some players who should attack the paint a little bit more. But
yeah, totally agree.
Anyway, switching back to you. So if you had a opportunity to lead a marketing effort for the Nets and even the NBA as a whole, you can take it as two different parts. What would you implement? How would you pitch the league or the team a partnership with HSN?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one thing that both the Nets, specifically when it comes to comparing the Nets to all the other NBA teams, and the NBA does very well, is catering to an international audience. I know that's something that even dating back to Prokhorov on the Nets, that he was focused on, that Joe Tsai is also focused on, is not just being a presence in the Brooklyn and New York area, which is obviously a focus for them, but having a major fan base, so internationally, around Asia, around Europe, given how quickly the NBA has grown in those markets. So I think that's something they've done a great job of, and it's also helped them from a financial and sponsorship perspective. When you look at Motorola coming in as the patch partner, and Motorola is owned by a Japanese company, and they're planning a big relaunch of the Motorola Razr, or I believe they also have then it's a partnerships either with it might be Qatar Airways or maybe Etihad Airways. It's one of them, but I think it was the first NBA team to have international airline partner. So I think they've done a great job of focusing on the international business for sure.
Yeah, what's something you specifically might, what would be your claim to fame type marketing campaign?
Yeah.
If you had the budget that you want, your dream budget.
If I was on the net side of things, or if I was on the brand side of things?
How about a little bit of both?
Sure.
Run with it.
Yeah. Yeah, why not? So I think from a brand perspective, what I would want in any deal I would do with the Nets is at least some limited rights, because obviously it gets pretty expensive, and it's you have to keep that in mind. But limited rights to have some opportunities to do appearances or photo shoots with KD and Kyrie. I think as strong as the Brooklyn Nets IP is, I think Kevin Durant's IP is stronger. So like when Motorola announced the deal, Kevin Durant was in the video, so of the announcement, and I think that's a great get by Motorola. And they're probably paying, I would assume, more than $10 million per year. So the Nets are going to give him that. But that would be something that I would want in my Nets deal. I'm a big believer, and if you look at the followers on Instagram or on social media of these athletes versus the teams, the athletes in most cases have significantly higher followings than the actual teams. And the athletes themselves, as I'm sure, Doug, you've seen me tweet, the athletes are brands themselves, something that I strongly believe in. So that is certainly something that I would want in a brand deal.
Yeah, and one last thing on that. Is there a particular brand that you want to see either with the Nets or in the league that hasn't really gotten a chance or maybe needs another chance?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I wouldn't say, I don't think I have any specific brands that come to mind, but I think something that is important is partnering. And I know I just talked about the international aspect, which is another part that's important, but partnering with local brands, or at least brands that have a tie to the New York or to the Brooklyn community, I think is really important. Of course, you're going to have your Motorola's that are just going to, and they're willing to pay a lot of money, and and that's that. And they may not have an actual tie to Brooklyn, but I think to also ensure that at least some of your partners do have that tie and aren't just like seen as random to the fans is really important. I think I saw something from Front Office Sports that more than 54% of their readers who took a survey don't know the jersey patch of their favorite NBA team. So imagine if that was a local Brooklyn brand, I'm sure that percentage would be significantly higher. So I think it's just really important from a community aspect, from a fan engagement aspect, to have local tie-ins.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I think it was one of our earlier episodes, we had someone say when there wasn't a patch that it should be a Brooklyn Brewery.
Yeah, like that would be so awesome. Not sure how realistic that is with the price point, and that's why it's tough to get those local brands at some points. But if they can't be the patch partner, then totally. I don't know if the Nets have a brewery partner, but if they do, it should 100% be the Brooklyn Brewery or some other local one for sure.
And then while we're on the topic of connections and everything in terms of marketing, one thing I wanted to ask you too is, I don't know if you saw, but the Nets are really reviving their roots in New Jersey, especially with the throwback uniforms, the court. Obviously, Kyrie Irving's from the area. So one question I want to ask you is, if you were in charge of that type of position of reviving the New Jersey roots, especially you being a New Jersey native and have, as we talked about in the previous in this episode, of your memories, the Izod Center, kind of the airline, the whole thing. How would you go about reviving the roots in New Jersey with the Brooklyn Nets?
Yeah. Firstly, I love that they are focusing on their New Jersey roots, and I think that's something that they stayed away from when they first moved to Brooklyn in the following years. And I don't necessarily blame them for doing it, because they had to establish a footing in Brooklyn. So I don't blame them for doing that. I'm happy they're doing it now. And to your point, I think something that has already been focused on and will continue to be focused on are Kyrie Irving's roots there. we're actually from the same town, and I did hit a hook shot over him at our local JCC one time. Fun fact. Kyrie's from West Orange, probably a 20-minute drive from where the Nets were playing when he was growing up, 30-minute drive. And I feel like he can, and of course, with his consent, and if he's open to it, and I'm sure it is something he would be, because I'm sure he's passionate about that hometown connection. But I think leveraging that Kyrie storyline can be really powerful. And I think that also leads to another more higher level conversation regarding marketing in general, especially in COVID times, and about how storytelling can be super powerful to pull on the heartstrings and just to get people connected and into certain things. I think the storytelling is really important, and I think Kyrie can be a major part of that. Maybe it's Kyrie and Kate. Maybe there's a camera guy following Kyrie and KD as Kyrie shows KD his roots in West Orange, and maybe their drive from Kyrie's old house in West Orange to where the Azad Center was, or something like that. There's so many opportunities that I think all three of us, I can speak for, would love to watch. So I think there's tons of opportunity there as well.
Yeah, no, I actually think it's a really good idea that I don't think I've heard anyone say. You had the throwback jerseys, people still want the Swamp Dragons, but when you were describing that, I just also thought of like a kid's book or comic book, an illustrated, tale of Kyrie to the NBA, pretty much being back home. It's something that really does sell, is seeing someone return home.
For sure. Yeah.
I do think that's a great idea, and you should kind of push that out there a little bit.
So we should send this snippet to the Nets marketing team after this.
And then I just got one more question for you, a little fun question. I don't know if you do New Year's resolutions, but if you do, what is your resolution for 2021?
Yeah, I don't do them as well as I should. I'll kind of like think about it, but this year actually, like I haven't yet, but planning to actually write something down and keep it in front of me on a daily basis. And my one, so one of my New Year's resolutions, just in regards to Hochberg Sports Marketing, is just, obviously I'm heading into year 2. I'm the only full-time employee, and my primary goal is just to make it a sustainable business that I can continue to do in the long term, because that will enable me to help more and more niche athletes and give them the confidence to do more branded deals and build their brands, and ultimately just help them make some more money, because a lot of these athletes are not making a lot of money at all. So that is one major goal of mine. And then another that I kind of talked about earlier, but just especially in these COVID times, and a lot of different emotions and whatnot, but just to continue to be a positive person who's putting out good vibes. And I know that's kind of a general type of goal, but I think it's like important to remember on a daily basis, because it's easy just like wake up on the wrong side of the bed and just be like, oh crap, like there's all these things I have to do today and I don't really feel like doing them. But it's really just all about your mindset, and a mindset can shift depending really in any situation. So I would say those two.
And then at least on my end, in terms of just the profession, so just get better as a writer. Get a book out there in 2021. That's one of my main goals.
I love that. That's awesome.
So have one already, but I want to get a second one up there. But so that's one.
Do you have any topics?
What's up?
Do you have the topic you're going to write about?
For the second one, I do not have it yet. I have a couple out to the other people, I guess you could say, to see what their interest levels are and kind of see where everything's at, I guess. But so far, just stand still. Obviously, with the Nets coverage, it's been a little hectic on my end. But
yeah.
And then outside of just work-wise, definitely want to get more back into running. I did track throughout high school, so I want to get out there. I know my brother runs a lot. A couple of my friends run a lot, so definitely want to get some 5-mile, 10-mile runs under my belt. So that's
awesome.
Definitely what I want to do as well. So, but yeah, you never know. So, but Doug, what about you?
Do a perfect cartwheel, or get attention in by any means necessary.
All right.
Very practical, but. In all seriousness, those were just 2 great picks from The Office. I think drinking a lot more water, you honestly feel much better.
Yeah.
I mean, my coffee to water ratio is horrific, and I know I'm self-injuring myself by doing so. So got to get the ratio back. I think it's really important. And, getting back into a rhythm of things, these last few months have been very interesting for me. So just getting my circadian rhythm right and feeling like I'm getting back into society again. Not that the nets aren't enough, but got to do a little bit more.
I think I'm gonna add one goal, one resolution, that is to attempt to get engagement on Twitter like Doug gets engagement, because sometimes I'm very jealous of his content and his engagement.
Don't make me spit out water, man.
From his Nets community. So I'm gonna add that in there.
Well, I'm telling you right now, Nets communities are very great ones. So if you can get in there and just be consistent with them, trust me, there's gonna be a lot of surprises on the horizon for you. But Matt, thanks again for joining us. We really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to join Doug and I. And the floor is yours. Where can our viewers and listeners find you and look up all about you?
For sure. Yeah, no, it's been great, Chris and Doug. Appreciate both of you taking the time. I know we're trying to plan this for the past few weeks, so happy we were finally able to jump on. You can find me on Twitter at Hochberg, HOCHBERG. Check out my website, hochbergsm.com. Those are probably the best two places to find me.
Well, you guys will have that all in the description below as well.
So thanks again for joining us. Keep enjoying the weather, stay safe, and Chris, just take us home.
You got it. So remember to send over any suggestions, questions, comments, or thoughts on any of our content by sending an email to wingspanpodcast@gmail.com. And do not forget to follow us on our social media accounts. But most importantly, make sure you subscribe to our podcast on your preferred listening service. And as for next time, stay classy, take care, wear a mask, and have a happy New Year, guys.
Awesome.